Northern California area, those areas are really flooding really severely. Even here, there's areas where people are suffering. They showed on the news last night, of course, cars cutting through like ships in water, just in the water. And people walking, weren't expecting it. Water's coming up to almost their knees, just on the streets. So it's incredible. So we're going to the message now. We're recording.
Recording in progress.
There she is. She's here. I mentioned that we saw the movie Jesus Revolution this last Sunday. And again, it's about the encounter between a straight-laced pastor whose church was dying. It's like every week or month, fewer numbers of people would attend. And through his daughter, who really didn't like what was going on at the church, she met this hippie. She just picked him up. He was hitchhiking, and she picked him up and took him where he needed to go. And in the course of their conversation, she found out that he was one of the leaders of this new, Jesus movement. So she invited him over, much to the chagrin of her dad, and had them come over. And so, he's kind of staring at her, what's this guy, bare feet and dirty and shaggy clothes doing in my house, So there was that scene. But they sat down and they started talking, and he was asking questions about, your people. Why are you, why are you this way? Why are you into drugs and all that stuff? And he explained, he said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the exact words, but the idea was that these people, as you call them, they're taking these drugs because in the final analysis, it's a substitute for God. They're taking these drugs because that's their way of trying to figure out meaning. They're looking for truth. There's a whole thing about this back and forth throughout the movie about the search for truth, And they're trying to find truth. They're trying to find meaning. They're trying to find God, as he said. Of course, they don't know that. They just know that they want to escape of course, the whole thing was a rebellion against the establishment, right? They want to escape that and the hypocrisy of the parents' generation, but they are looking for their own meaning. They're looking for their own sense of truth, and so he was saying that that's what they're doing. They have a substitute for God. And so he felt it was his duty to kind of point them to who the real God is. That, yeah, you're taking drugs now, but I want to show you that there is a way to God without the drugs. Anyway, I'm paraphrasing the movie, but that's pretty much the gist of it. But do you know that today many people are looking for love in all the wrong places? Sounds like there was a song about that. Looking for love in all the wrong places. I'm not going to try to sing it. The question is, have you or have we ever done that? Have we ever tried to look for love in all the wrong places, whether it's drugs, alcohol, illicit relationships, just trying to escape? Some people, not being able to find love, they do the ultimate, they take to the ultimate, right, in their lives. Well, let's talk about somebody who was looking for love. And I'm going to be using, as the scripture Gloria read, I'm going to be using John 4 and verses 5. I'm not going to read every verse on this, but the passage is from verses 5 to 42. But I'm going to go just talk about part of that scripture in my message today. And it's, of course, the story about Jesus encountering the Samaritan woman at the well. And so we see Jesus, right? The story starts where it says Jesus came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. Okay, now, we think that Jesus, he was alone, okay? And that was by design. He was alone. He sent his disciples away to the town to get food so that he could be alone. And so he went to this well where he knew that this Samaritan woman would be coming alone. Okay? So when the Samaritan woman came to drink water, Jesus, she probably didn't really notice him because he probably was kind of off to the side and she's just trying to take care of her business and go, right? But he said to her, will you give me a drink? And his disciples had gone into town to buy food. Again, that's just to show that Jesus wanted to be alone. He had sent his disciples away. So here this woman is here. Here he's asking her for water. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, verse 9, the Samaritan woman said to him, you, talking about Jesus, are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? What's wrong with that? Well, it just so happens that the Jews and Samaritans hated each other. The Jews thought they were superior as people and in religion to the Samaritans, to the point that they called Samaritans menstruants from the cradle. You know, it's not just a woman's unclean period, according to Levitical law, when she was in her period. No, you're perpetually unclean. So any touching, any contamination of a dish by a Samaritan, the Jew's not supposed to touch that. And she understood that that was the way things were. She understood that. So she's saying, how can you ask me for that? Don't you know what you're doing? Don't you know what you're asking? You know? So this is because of the whole mess of how the Samaritans were. The Samaritans were neither fully Jew nor fully Gentile. And so both Jews and Gentiles hated him. So imagine being in that position, in that situation. Okay, so Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and what it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Now, going back to verse 9, where it says, Jews do not associate with Samaritans, and I explained to you the setup for that. She carried a lot of shame. Not only as a Samaritan and as a woman, that's two strikes right there in the way they look at society, but her own personal life. You know, we need love. All of us need love. But we get into relational situations that prove to be painful, right? Probably all of us have experienced pain in relationships, whether it's romantic relationships, whether it's family, friend, coworker, you know, boss to employee. We've experienced pain in our relationships. And some people, though they're out of that other relationship, and there's still that desire for love. There's still that desire to be loved. Yet, you don't want to go into that pain again. So what you do is you try to escape it. You try to run away from it. And that's kind of what this woman was doing. You see, she came alone to the well. Usually women go in bunches to the well, either in the morning, early morning, or late at night. She was alone at noon. So she knew when to kind of like separate herself from the rest. She didn't want to deal with the shame. She didn't want to deal with the mockery and things that she would suffer because of her life situation, which we'll get into. Okay. But we, rather than face it on, we don't have the wherewithal to deal with it, and so we try to escape it. You know, where do you find love? Where do you find love? The Jesus Film Project is an organization where they send missionaries to various parts of the world where they don't have the Bible in their own language. And what they will do is they will learn the language, the local language, and then they will take a film that they have made about the life of Jesus and his crucifixion and resurrection, and they will overdub it with that language of the people. And they will try to get an audience with the people there and show it. Okay? And, you know, I get their letters, and it's very inspiring what the success is. There's one story about how they went to this one village, and they showed the film, and there was a woman there who had been continually beaten by her husband. Her husband just beat her and beat her. And so she wasn't feeling loved, but when she came and saw the film, she saw the love from Jesus through that film. And so she said, that's the kind of love I'm looking for. How do I become a Christian? And so they worked with her, and she accepted Jesus Christ, and she became a Christian. She became a follower. She went home, and of course, her husband, not being too pleased, he was beating her. But over a period of time, he noticed that she had changed. So much to the fact that he said, you know what, you're amazing, you're different. I want what you have. So she brought him along, and he was asking them, where can I find this love? Where can I find the love that my wife has? Apparently, that what all you all can give. And so, yes, he was shared the love of Christ with him too. So, again, where are we looking for love? And they say hurt people, right? If you've been hurt, you turn it over and hurt people. Well, I think it's the other way around too. If you are loved by God, then you can replace hate with love. Martin Luther King said, hate doesn't conquer hate, only love can do that. But if you are loved by God, and you know that you are loved by God, you can bring love where hate is. Instead of drawing a circle to keep people out, you draw a circle to bring people in. Okay, verse 10 of the NIV in this passage, John 4, Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So Jesus is telling her, it's really fun to see how Jesus is kind of shifting the conversation. The more you read this passage and you examine it, pick it apart, you'll see how Jesus is very cleverly taking this woman along to a point where he wants her to have an epiphany, a realization of some eternal truth about him and about her. So he said, if you knew who it was that was asking you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Now, first of all, she's skeptical, right? She says, man, well, that's not the word in the scripture. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? So she's kind of skeptical at first because he came alone. He didn't have his big old water pot like she did. So he's saying, I can give you some water. And she said, with what? Okay. And then she went further. She said, wait a minute. You see this well? This is a well our father Jacob gave us. Now, are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well, drank from it himself, as did all of his sons and livestock? So this well was in the family for generations and continued to be used in her day. So he's saying, are you greater than that? This living water that you're talking about? And so Jesus said, everyone who drinks this water, verse 13, will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And she says, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. Still kind of skeptical, but she's interested because this man is talking to her in a way that, wow, he really is confident about what he's saying. He seems really confident, something. So we see that Jesus cleverly shifts the focus of the conversation. How did it start off? It started off with him asking her for water, right? And now he's turning around, so now she's asking him for water. But what she doesn't realize at this point is that he is referring to something that speaks to spiritual thirst. It will quench, it will satisfy spiritual thirst. So it is greater than the water of Jacob's well. Okay, so we see that Jesus here is revealing himself as the living water. Jesus is the living water, and he is telling her that. So going on to verse 16 now, I love this. Jesus says, okay, you're asking me to give you this water? Go call your husband and come back. When I first read this, when I first was able to read and understand, what I was reading, I thought, what is he talking about? Why is he bringing her husband, all her, why is he, what's he got to do with anything? Can't, see, I just wonder what was up about this. Now, Jesus had his reason, right? He was setting her up for something. He was setting her up. Okay. Because I was thinking that if this was a story that I was writing, kind of making it up instead of it being real, after the woman says, sir, give me this water so I won't have to keep coming back, I would say, okay, what I am talking about is living water. You need to first repent and believe and receive this living water of mine. Now, that may have gone over or may not have, right? But Jesus was setting her up, and we'll see why. He said, go call your husband and come back. And she said, I have no husband. Jesus said, you're absolutely right. You do not have a husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands. And the man you now have is not your husband. So yes, indeed, you are telling the truth. So, and so she said, sir, I can see that you're a prophet. I see that you're a prophet. You see, again, why bring her husband up in this? Why bring her up? Why bring her husbands up in this at all? As I mentioned, it could have gone another way. Jesus could have taken a totally different approach to answering, to respond to her question about water. Now, I'd like to point out something that kind of made sense to me. We read this section, and first of all, we think about the woman, the Samaritan woman in the well, and we know the story as Jesus reveals to us her life. We read this part, and then we come to the conclusion that this woman is an adulterer or promiscuous or whatever, just, not living a great life. Now, and right now, she's gone through 5 husbands for whatever reason. We might even think she was a gold digger and just left him. No. And now she's living in sin with her current boyfriend. But her situation, it could have resulted from several circumstances. So let's consider something. And this is information I got off the web. It was living. Got this off the internet. And this article was titled, Who is a Samaritan Woman at the Well? And it says that throughout the years, this woman has often been maligned or misunderstood because of her sexual history. This history often colors our reading of this episode, so let's look more at this aspect more closely. It starts off, certainly 5 marriages is a high number, but in this time period, it was not unreasonable. Widowhood was a common experience in a culture where women were married very young. Divorce, in order to gain a more socially advantageous marriage, was also not uncommon, though it is unclear if the Samaritans allowed women to apply for it without a male guardian, as the Romans may have. So, conclusion on this part is that it seems most likely that her many marriages were not a result of her choice. So it could have been she was a pawn, married. And then her current situation, living with a man who is not her husband, could be the result of several possible scenarios. She could be a concubine, which was a legal arrangement but with lesser status than marriage. If the 2 partners in the relationship were not of equal social status or wanted to avoid inheritance issues, they might choose this option. She could also be a second wife, a role which was also socially acceptable but not considered the same status as the first wife. Okay, so those are things to consider as we understand this. Now, are we downplaying the fact that this woman probably sinned? No, we're not. But what's interesting to see is that we need to follow Jesus' example here. We shouldn't be too quick to prejudge the Samaritan woman. Her source, the details of her life, regardless of what happened in her life, it became a source of shame. It became a source of shame, and so that's why she did everything kind of isolated. She was alone. She could not associate, as I mentioned earlier, with other women who might shun her, mock her, or just generally disapprove of her. So we must not be too quick to prejudge her. Rather, we should follow Jesus' example here. What does Jesus do? What does he not do? He doesn't take this as an opportunity to declare her an outright sinner. He says, yeah, you have 5 husbands and the one you're with is not now. You're a sinner, you're an adulterer, and you are subject to, Gehenna. No, he didn't do that. He didn't call her a sinner or condemn her. And again, that does not excuse her sin, but that's not the point of his bringing her out, exposing what her lifestyle, what her life has been. No, he wants to take her deeper into her understanding her need for him. So that's the direction of the conversation he's doing with this. He is speaking with love. His words showed that, yeah, I'm telling you about yourself, but I value you in spite of yourself. Okay? And that's what amazed the Samaritan woman. She was amazed at this point because not only was Jesus speaking truth in everything he was saying, she could agree even from the time he opened his mouth. Yeah, this man, he's speaking stuff that makes sense. But then he made it personal. That's the thing that got her attention. He made this personal and showed that he knew her well, even better than she could have imagined. And not only that, he cared. He showed that he cared for her with that, his exposing her with care. And she began to realize that she was talking to an extraordinary man. And here we see that Jesus revealed himself to her as a prophet. He's already revealed himself as living water. Now she sees him as a prophet. Now we read verse 20, continuing. Now she says, yeah, I see that you're a prophet. Now let's talk about worship. Since, prophets are trying to get us to worship God. Our ancestors, verse 20, worshipped on this mountain, probably Mount Gerizim, I forget it was. But you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. So you see there was this back and forth there about what's the proper place, where's the proper place to worship God. And the Jews and the Samaritans had totally opposite answers to that. Jesus said in verse 21, woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is of the Jews. Verse 23, yet a time is coming, and is now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman says, I know the Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. So, yeah, I can say that. There was something about him, words he was talking about, words she had never heard before. Wait a minute. If you're a Jew, you're supposed to tell me to worship in Jerusalem. My Samaritan friends are telling me we should worship on this mountain. And you're saying it's different? That none of this matters? That there's something even better? It's more of a spiritual place that we go to rather than a physical location? Right. I know that the Messiah is going to explain that to us. That was fun. And Jesus said, you're talking to him.
Yes.
He said, I am he.
Yes.
I am. Yes. So, the woman, talking about worship, Jesus' response was he was guiding her to see more and more that he was greater than a prophet even. When she says the Messiah is coming, Jesus says, I am. I am here. So we see the final revelation is that Jesus revealed himself to her as the Messiah. He revealed himself to her as the living water. He revealed himself to her as a prophet. And now he revealed himself to her as the Messiah. Okay. going to, I'm going to skip verse 27. It just talks about the disciples returning. Oh, let me mention this. I will mention verse 27 in this light. Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with the woman. But no one asked, what do you want? Why are you talking to her? See, they knew that Jews don't talk to women, even of Jews in public. And they don't talk to women Jews, much less Samaritan women. So, but they didn't ask. Can you imagine? I mentioned that Jesus came alone, right? By himself. He wanted his disciples to do what they needed to do. He wanted a personal encounter with this woman. And I believe this was a divine appointment that he had set up, right? And so the woman comes and meets with him and discusses it. Can you imagine if the scribes and Pharisees and all the people that followed Jesus, can you imagine if they were there? Can you imagine the kind of ruckus they would try to stir up? You know, Jesus didn't want to have anything to do with that. He says, you know, these guys in their stuffed shirts and all, they're, you know, I don't need that. This woman doesn't need that. She needs to hear words of love. So I'm going to give her that. And so verse 28, the woman was so excited. Then, leaving her water pot, her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man that told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town, verse 30, and made their way toward him. It's really cool when I mentioned this earlier, this is cool when somebody can tell you about yourself. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and yet do so in a manner that shows compassion and grace. You know, I heard a classic definition of a true friend. A true friend is someone who knows all about you and still loves you. You know? So, I thought it was very interesting that John records that when the woman went back to the people, she could have said all kinds of things about Jesus, but her focus was, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, he did do that, but didn't he say all kinds of other things and talk to her about other things as well? Why is she focused on everything that I ever did? What's that about? Well, I think it fits into this knowing all about you and still loving you. You see, the woman told everybody, he told me everything I ever did. He told me all about myself, but he told me with understanding. He told me with compassion. He told me with forgiveness. He told me with hope. And above all, he told me with love. That's the man that told me about myself, but gave me hope that I don't have to remain here. He understood me. He had compassion. And his hope as the Messiah, this could be the Messiah because he's given me hope that I never had before. He's given me love I never had before. I never felt this kind of acceptance. I never felt this kind of connection before. Could this be the Messiah? That's the kind of stuff that's worth shouting from the rooftops. And that's what she did. She went and she shouted that from the rooftops. Got the whole town coming to her. You see, what the Samaritan woman came to see is that she went to a well. She went to the well to quench a physical thirst. You know, she had her water pots, water jars. But her encounter with Jesus showed her that she needed to quench her spiritual thirst. All of her shame, all of her sorrow, all of her pain, all of her rejection, all of her ridicule, and whatever else she was facing and suffering and encountering, all of those things could now find resolution in Jesus, the Messiah. You know, it's kind of interesting because it says that she left her water pot. Isn't that kind of the same way where the disciples left their nets to follow Jesus? You know, so she became the first evangelist, as it were. Even before the disciples themselves came out the door, here she is evangelizing the whole town. And just to summarize the last few verses of this chapter, which would be verses 39 to 42, you know, it says they came out, they heard Jesus speak, And he said, look, stay with us, tell us more. And many became believers, and they told her, look, we came out here because of what you said about him. Now that we've seen him for himself, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Verse 42 says, now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. Okay? There's a young man, he used to be a Disney star. His name is Joshua Bassett. And he was in the High School Musical, the musical series. There was like several High School Musical shows that came out, and my daughter could probably recite every line of every single one. Anyway, we did watch some of the High School Musical shows, the movies themselves. But the musical itself, he was one of the stars in it. And he gave a speech at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards this past Saturday. And he was receiving an award for the favorite male TV star of the kids show. And he made his declaration of faith. He said, I love to thank my Savior, Jesus Christ. And I want to publicly declare him as my Lord and Savior. He said, I want to say something. There are a lot of people here who are burdened, brokenhearted, and have been beaten down by life. And these are talking to, kids his age, 22, in the 20s or whatever. They've already been burdened, brokenhearted, and beaten down by life. I'm here to tell you, he says, for those of you who have lost hope, there's a very real God who loves you more than you will ever possibly know. His promise is peace, and my testimony is my healing. He said, forgive quickly, love freely, and walk courageously. Love always wins in the end. You see, he says, long story short, I grew up Christian, and I ran the other way, as far as I could go, in pursuit of the truth, which is the same thing the Jesus movie was looking for. That only ended in addiction, depression, suicidal ideation, eating disorders, etc., he said. No other teacher gave me anywhere near the peace that Jesus Christ did. So he said, I'm here to publicly declare him as my Lord and Savior. Now, we are all like the Samaritan woman. Okay? We have experienced the various types of brokenness in life. We've all been beaten down, broken. We've had our share of pain. And some of it just seems to be continuous. So we go to our wells, where we go to quench the thirsts of life that we try to face. Okay? But deep down, God has created us with a desire to drink deeply from the fountain of love. And it's love that comes from God. And that's why only Jesus Christ can provide this true love. He is the living water. And when we see and experience his love, we no longer have to thirst for love again. Jesus said, if you drink this water, you will never thirst. His love is free, his love is unconditional, and his love is eternal. And like Joshua Bassett says, God's love always wins in the end. So let's be like the Samaritan woman, and let's drink of the living water, Jesus Christ, our Messiah. Let's find our total satisfaction and fulfillment in him through the love only he can provide. Amen?